ابعت لي جواب وطمني.
Hi, thank you all for joining us today for a conversation with filmmaker Mona Benyamin. My name is Line Ajan, and this discussion is part of the film program IB'ATLI GAWAB, Signed, Sealed, Delivered, which I curated as part of ArteEast's Unpacking the ArteArchive program. Unpacking the ArteArchive is a legacy program preserving and presenting over 17 years of film and video programming by ArteEast, inviting curators to program selections from the ArteArchive in dialogue with contemporary voices. IB'ATLI GAWAB, Signed, Sealed, Delivered is titled after a song by the late Syrian singer Sabah Fakhri, and it explores longing and political resistance through epistolary forms in 4 essay films by Mona Benyamin, who's with us here today, Emily Jasser, Osama Muhammad, and Wiam Samav Badr Khan, and Akram Zaatari. The films will be screening online between November 18 and November 21 at artearchive.org. And first, I'd like to thank ArteEast's team for inviting me to curate the program. ArteEast is a leading New York-based nonprofit institution dedicating to promoting contemporary art from the Middle East and North Africa through public programming, strategic partnership, and online platforms. You can check out more of their programs on arteeast.org. And so today I'm here with Mona Benyamin, who's a Palestinian visual artist and filmmaker. Hi, Mona. Mona's based in Haifa, and in her work, she explores intergenerational outlooks on hope, trauma, and questions of identity, using humor and irony, and I would add music, as political tools of resistance and reflection. Her recent works have been screened, among others, at the Museum of Modern Art, Another Gaze, Sheffield DocFest, and Columbia University. So thank you, Mona, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I actually wanted to start this conversation by mentioning the importance of your film, Moonscape, which is part of the program, and its importance for my own curatorial process. So as I said, the screening is titled after a song by Sabah Fakhri, but the title of the program actually came from a brief email exchange that we had about the aesthetics of Moonscape. So I had a hunch that it was that the decor in Moonscape was partly inspired by David Lynch and Twin Peaks. And when I said that to you, you said it was partly true, but you also replied by saying, actually, watch this video attached. And it was a video of Sabah Fakhri performing IB'ATLI GAWAB in a TV program that was on in the 90s called Jar al-Qamar. And so your film is sort of this weird space where Sabah Fakhri meets David Lynch. And after you sent that video to me, I kept on listening to Sabah Fakhri on replay, and that's how I came up with the title. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get this idea of telescoping these two TV references? So David Lynch's Twin Peaks, Orbit's Jar al-Qamar. So they're close visually, but they're so distant in the genres and historical and geographical context they refer to. So could you please talk a bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. They're very different in terms of genre and the worlds that they come from. But I think that specifically the Black Lodge and the Studio Orbit that was destined for this show have something very similar in their relationship with time and space, that they're somehow excluded from their outer environment, and they symbolize a transcendental place where that is essentially above time, above environment, and is just more. It's kind of disconnected from the world by creating its own sphere, where it's essentially a universe of its own. And right. It's something that, when people analyze Twin Peaks, it's very clear how the Black Lodge is tied to the human consciousness. but the Sabah Fakhri performances and Jar al-Qamar generally as a show, where also Diana Haddad performed, Milham Barakat, and I think Noor Mhanna also.
Yeah.
Is something that is timeless in its own sense, where now I think 30 something more years after they were all recorded, they are still being looped in family houses, at
Right.
least in our own on holidays and things like that. So yeah, the decor itself is very interesting in general. The aesthetics of Arabic music and music videos and studios are beautiful and so bizarre. So when you link it to Western culture, you are able to analyze them somewhat in a different way. But
Right.
I think the link is most definitely like tied to the timelessness and the universe that is created in these two studios.
Right.
And I really wanted that in Moonscape, because essentially it is about some longing for a home and some twilight zone that is in between displacement, longing, hope, hopelessness. It's a film that is in a state of search, and it felt very suitable to have it be shot inside, like enveloped in a studio that is also detached from time and space and environment. So yeah.
Right. And it was very successful, I think, in Moonscape, that sense of timelessness, because, you know, obviously some images, and I think we'll talk about that more later, reference very specific, you know, aesthetics of 1990s music video in the Arab world. But at the same time, there's this sort of like the sense of floating. And at other times, I think some of the gestures, especially your dad's, it's as if he's listening to jazz, and even the music itself is kind of has like this jazzy aspect in some parts. So there is this sort of confusion, or this sort of like impossibility of like specifically locating one reference. But you were talking about how bizarre the aesthetics of music videos, Arabic music videos, but also the studios that where some of them were shot or where concerts were shot. So they're truly bizarre. I think that is the word. How did you recreate that in a domestic setting? Because the film was filmed in your house, right?
Yeah. So basically, I want to comment about the jazz thing. It was actually I'm really happy that you made this observation, because it was something that was very intentional. When we were recording the song in the studio, and it was like after we finished the recording and it was time to mix and master it, I was basically guiding the Adham Darwish, who recorded it, and was gonna do the mixing and the mastering, about how it is supposed to be some kind of weird mix between Frank Sinatra, Sabah Fakhri, and you know, Dolly Parton and Sabah al-Shahrura. So it's just like to give him this kind of like idea of what I'm aiming for. And yeah, so I tried to create this mix, and it was something that was in my mind throughout the process. But your question was how I created it in my domestic environment.
Yeah, in your domestic environment, because I mean, just looking at the tiles, it's I don't know. I know it's a very practical question, but
no, actually, it was relatively very low budget and very crammed. Essentially, it was all shot not even in our house; it was purely in my bedroom.
Okay.
What we had to do is basically take the bed out empty
Oh, wow.
empty the floor, remove all the things that I had hung on the wall. The floor is like a PVC surface that we spread out across the room. The wallpapers, we put them, and just two black curtains. And
Oh, wow.
the red table was not even a table. It was just two cardboards that I cut into a circle and put on a pile of books, and then put the tablecloth on them. So it was very low budget, very improvised, and my parents helped me build the set. So
Amazing. But very effective, nevertheless.
yeah.
And yeah, speaking again of this, so the setting in itself of the film is not the moon, but the main subject of the film is the sort of like under the radar story of lands being sold on the moon by this American man named Dennis M. Hope. But the moon is also present in at various moments. It's not just this lunar history that's at stake. And actually, the film begins with what I assume is the logo of the TV channel on which Moonscape is being broadcasted. So Sound of Hope. And that actually kind of looks like sort of a revolving celestial body, maybe not a moon, but just like a planet. So I don't know if there's a reference to Orbit TV in that, but so in your film, more than like a sort of a topos of sci-fi or like an abstract space of speculation or projection, we kind of feel that the moon is also like a timeless motif in Arabic. And I mean, it is a timeless motif in Arabic poetry and then music, from the most traditional forms to the more contemporary ones. So how did this romanticized symbolism of the moon feed your work? Or like, where does sort of like a romance come into play in a way in your film?
Well, the minute that I decided that the story and that the research and email exchange with the lunar embassy are gonna turn into a song, I realized that there are a lot of other layers that I need to deal with that are very much related to our culture, and one of them being is the comparison between the woman and the moon, and using the moon as a metaphor for a woman who's a loved one or a lover that is longed for, and also as a symbol of hope, which is very much apparent in Arabic music. So I had to start dealing with that and just unpack it all in order to create, like to dismantle this idea among other ideas that I wanted to dismantle that are related to colonialism, ownership, and the idea of return. And so I turned to Arabic music videos that deal specifically with the moon as a topic and as a metaphor. And I think that by using my parents as the actors and trying to create these scenes that are only half directed, I mean, I would only tell them where to stand, but I would never tell them how to pose, because I wanted them to preserve their own facial expressions. I didn't want to force any sort of acting on them. So when I bring the authenticity of their looks and implant them in the universe of like music videos and romanticism and nostalgia, I think there's a contradiction that shows up on the screen. I mean, my mom looks nothing like the woman that Ihab Tawfiq is looking at in the music video. Like, you can tell how much she doesn't want to be in front of the camera, whereas the other woman is completely acting like a seductress. So it was about challenging different forms and symbols of hope, and really trying to examine the meeting point between hope, despair, and nostalgia through our own culture and through the bureaucratic journey that I went through with the Lunar Embassy.
Right. And it's funny because at the same time, this sort of very playful format of the video clip, be it Arabic or Westernized, but it's a very playful format. But at the same time, even though it's supposed to be apolitical, in this case, it's kind of a way for you to deal with what you were saying, so which are quite heavy issues of colonization and trauma. And I don't know. I was wondering if you had consciously thought about this use of subversion and dark humor as a sort of a way to circumvent the expectations on what like a Palestinian artist is supposed to be producing. You know, like narratives of trauma and victimhood in a way, or heroic narratives of like you know, the Fidaiyin that was very popular in the also in the 90s. So I don't know if that's something you had consciously thought about or not.
Of course. I mean, one of my favorite musicians is Sheikh Imam, who is also who's like one of the pioneers of resistance music, and he would do it with a lot of humor, and would make fun of a lot of political figures through songs, and it's something that I find very inspirational constantly, and I believe in its subversive power and its ability to create moments of reflection. I don't like to call it to change people's minds or alternate thoughts, but to create moments of reflection on certain realities. And when I was basically I chose to work with the form of a music video from a place that completely believes in accessibility. I mean, we all grew up watching music videos, and it's something that is constantly in the background. And its format is something that is very much imprinted in our minds, just because it's constantly something that we're forced to consume. So when I take the template of a music video and understand what it is supposed to behave like, and mess its mechanisms up from the inside, it allows me to go under and just break through different layers in it, and actually create feelings of uncomfortableness that go against what is actually expected from a Palestinian artist to create. And Moonscape was created when I was in a very hopeless place, and it was a journey of trying to find hope, and then realizing it's nowhere to be found, which is essentially, if I want to put it in a if I want to summarize the song, it describes this journey from the dream of owning land on the moon to the passport that is essentially useless. And yeah, to create that through song gave me a lot of flexibility, and it made the process so much easier and much more fun, because you get to research through music and you listen to an endless amount of songs. And we have a tradition, you know, in Arab culture to narrate and tell stories through music. I mean, our singers can stand on stage for hours just telling stories. Through song. So it's amazing.
It is. And again, not to bring everything to Sabah Fakhri, but he has, I think, like a sort of a record of standing on stage. I think
he
it's
broke
like
the
several
Guinness World
hours.
Record. He broke the Guinness World Record
in
in Las Vegas, where he performed for, I think, like over 9 hours, I think, straight.
I wanted to
place in
say 10
Las
hours, but I
Vegas.
wasn't sure.
Yeah, I said 9 because I didn't want to exaggerate, although I'm pretty sure it was more than 9.
Yeah, and in my head it was 10, but I might be mistaken. But yeah, it's true. I think that's also one of the things I also wanted to ask you was, or to speak about, was also the richness of the song itself, because it also, you know, it also summons so many references. I'm not sure, maybe you'll tell me if I'm correct or not, but there are parts where, to me, it kind of sounded very similar to the dark humor and even the specific use of oud as a musical instrument. So these kind of elements that we find a lot in Ziad Rahbani and Joseph Saar and Sharb al-Ruhana's music. So this use of like sort of dark humor, but in a that kind of eventually leads to a social commentary in a way, even though it's hidden. And then, I don't know, there's this melancholy that is found in more traditional forms of songs, but that can also be found in music that we were listening to in the 1980s and 1990s. So I'm thinking of like Rim Benna, for instance. And then we talk about your dad's gestures of jazz. So there are like so many rich references to music. And I think the song by itself is almost like it could stand as a song by itself. And at the same time, it manages to turn, it manages to evoke and to comprehend the whole breadth of your own research and your thinking through this film. So I was just wondering, how did you turn your research into musical lyrics that actually rhyme and have rhythms, etc.?
Well, it was. I felt like it was. When in cartoons, like a lamp lights and someone gets an idea, that the decision to turn the research into a song was essentially this kind of moment that just solved everything for me. I just like felt the puzzle pieces fell in place,
Right.
and because I was like talking about the moon constantly and like working with on the research about the lunar embassy. And on the side, I was just getting fascinated, like with music and the similarity between Sabah Fakhri and David Lynch. So and then I realized the role that the moon holds in our story telling and our musical narratives. That it only made sense for me to turn the research into a song. So with the help of my friend Bakri Mawasi, we translated the research, and then with the help, we translated from English to Arabic, and then with the help of my mom, who is an Arabic teacher, we divided it into parts and turned it into a poem. And then I divided the poem into basically two sections that are the duet. And I gave my friend Dima Azar the parts that she's supposed to sing, and to Lu'ay Sruji the parts that he's supposed to sing, without any sort of instruction. I just told Dima, like, listen, I want your parts to sound more Fairuz-like, and if you can put like some hints of Zahrat al-Mada'in in there, do it. And for Lu'ay, I told him just go with the Marcel Khalifi kind of thing, because also Marcel Khalifi dealt with he sang poems that were written by Mahmoud Darwish. So it stuck to this genre. And also Zahrat al-Mada'in is a song about longing for home and like longing for Jerusalem, basically, and the idea of return. So I really wanted to have these two elements inside the musical part of Moonscape, and they did a perfect job. Like I'm so shocked that I'm such an awful director. I gave them so little instructions, and they did such an amazing work. And I'm very thankful for that.
I have to say, I doubt you're a very bad director, because you know there's the way you dealt with your parents as characters and actors of the film, and the way you work with the audio, and the combination of both being successful. I think maybe it's as little directing as it takes to I don't know, get them going. But so in what you're saying, it does feel like, even though there's the sense of timelessness in the decor, and even though there's all of these references, at least to me, that's how I interpret it. I do see a lot of references that go back to the late 1990s. So more or less the time when you were growing up, I was growing up.
And it was more about the time I was born.
Okay, yeah, right. Yes, you are you are younger, but I'm assuming maybe these are references that would appear on TV when you were very young, and that even lasted till the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, Rotana mostly, it was constantly
Exactly.
in our house. I was consuming it through my older sister, who would have it on repeat all the time.
Yeah, and I think there's also a reference to Space Tune also in the film at some point, or no, the Udna.
Yes.
We are
Yeah,
back,
yeah,
basically. It's like the advertisement interlude in this cartoon channel that was, I don't know, it might still exist. I'm maybe just not aware anymore. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, why do you think the 1990s or the late 1990s, early 2000s are particularly relevant, or do you think this is sort of like pure nostalgia on maybe your end and on the end of several other artists that kind of go back to this aesthetics a lot?
I mean, of course, there is a sort of nostalgia, because for me, you know, the 90s shaped most of my consciousness, and you get very attached to the things that you consume as a child. But also, the more we're evolving, the more the more time passes, the more westernized the media industry and the music industry, and basically every genre that can be consumed, like every cultural genre that can be consumed, is turning into Western modes, rather than relying on things that already existed in our own culture. So yes, there is a very, very strong nostalgia to that past, because that is that I feel is essentially the strongest resource, and the strongest connection that I have with my culture, that is not romanticized, but really strong, because I lived through it.
Right. I think it's very important what you were saying, the sort of the idea that these references were sort of or like that came before a shift towards a more westernized way of consuming images and songs. And I think that's something that is also quite visible in our use of language also. Because a lot of these TV channels, all of the programs, obviously you had various dialects being spoken, but all of these, you know, big corporate media, so like NBC, Rotan, etc., they also kind of impacted the way we think about language, because there was a sort of homogenization of the language that was of the dialects mainly that were spoken in the song. So you had this sort of like mixture of like a Syro-Lebanese dialect in a way that had some Egyptian in it, but like very briefly. And I feel like that kind of ended up being more and more emphasized to today. There's sort of a disconnection with, let's say, literary or classical Arabic, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think. I mean, obviously it can be, but I think it also opens up to other ways of communication. But in a way, it kind of, when you talk about that, it makes sense that when you first wrote the lyrics of the song, you wrote them as a poem. So you kind of went back to this very classical format in a way.
Yeah, Definitely. Yeah, I wanted to write it as a poem, and I wanted to write it in like you know I forgot how to say عامية in in English.
Yeah, I guess in me too now, but I guess in like um, daily life
Like
dialect.
spoken dialect.
Spoken Arabic. Yeah, spoken dialects.
Yeah, in spoken Palestinian Arabic, and because it was like to emphasize the storytelling aspect of the song. So I wanted it to have like this more flow, and also accessibility is very important to me, and the
Right.
audience that I care about most is the local audiences, because essentially, I want to have a collective that will be able to reflect with me on the things that we go through as a people, and it's not very beneficial when you just turn to the West with your problems. Like the only thing that you can get out of them is pity or empathy. And if you really want to make change, which is also something that I doubt art can do, you need to start by pushing people to reflect on certain states. And that can only be achieved when you establish a communication with them. That's why I choose to work with familiar formats and spoken language, and things that make it more accessible for the audience, and not just like bring things and over intellectualize, and I don't know.
Right. I'm curious how. Well, first, has it been screened in Palestine or no? And if so, how was it received?
It was screened once in Taipei, and it was actually the best experience that I had in terms of screening. Um, the screening started at 7 p.m., where I showed both my films, Trouble in Paradise and Moonscape, which in total are less than 30 minutes together. But we ended up speaking and talking until 10 p.m. About the films, and they were really. It was such an amazing audience because they were asking questions, and they were not afraid to challenge, and they were not afraid to criticize, and it was really beautiful. And it evolved into a very meaningful discussion about how the West has influenced us, and what our relationship towards nostalgia is. So it was really great, and to the positive feedback that I got, which is actually the least important thing that happened on that night. It was just very moving to see that it managed to create such a deep dialogue that continued even after I had to leave home. They told me that they stayed. I needed to go home because I had work the next day, and it's a very long drive. But they messaged me and told me that people stayed there until 11:30, just continuing the discussion and picking up on it. And it was so heartwarming to see that it opened up a dialogue, and not just a few minute criticism in order to just do your duty in terms of socializing, which is like a tendency that the art world has, of to see and be seen. It was a very genuine and experience that was really the best.
That sounds really really touching, actually.
It was.
And you were mentioning your attention or your will to always have this sort of accessibility in your film. And I think something that also struck me is that in the song, So the song kind of, like you said, explains your research process. So you, as someone who's based in Haifa and who has an Israeli passport, so can't go to Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and, all of these neighboring countries. And so that's your specific position. I think that's mainly where the research departed from. But then in the song, at some point, you take the example of what's a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon, let's say, can they buy land on the moon? What is their position? So there's also this sort of, I don't know if empathy is the word, but there's this sort of inclusivity of a broader Palestinian community. So it'd be Palestinians in diaspora or Palestinians with Israeli passports in Haifa. And yeah, I wonder if maybe if you were to screen the film with also maybe like a Palestinian community, but that's not in the Middle East or that's abroad, I wonder if it would be as touching. I feel like it would, because it's even though there are all of these funny cues. Yeah, it is still. I mean, the core of the film is quite dark in a lot of ways. I mean, it's the reality you live in and a lot of people live in, this sort of impossibility of moving freely. So yeah,
the Palestinian experience is in itself very not divided, but it includes so many different experiences and them. And these experiences are tied to other experiences of other Arab countries, that they create like a web where on the most deepest, most humane level we can connect. And also we went through a lot of political trauma that is very similar because of the colonial regimes that were imposed on us in different times.
right.
And actually the film, like Moonscape, is going to be screened in Beirut for the first time at the end of the month. So it's very touching to me that it got there, that it's crossing the border, even
Right.
though I can't.
Yeah.
And I'm very much looking forward to see how it goes and to hear more about it. So I wish I could be there, but unfortunately, still don't have 5 stamps on that passport.
On your lunar passport. Where is it screened in Beirut? Just to maybe do a small. Okay, amazing. So if that's all on your end, maybe we can end on this positive note of Moonscape having been able to travel, even though you haven't yet, but maybe someday.
Yes, and next time I hope that the positive note will be that I've
exactly. Exactly. So it's a nice way to wrap up, sort of thinking again about the sound of hope, let's say.
It was mostly influenced by the Rutana logo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I saw an orbiting thing, and I thought it could be orbit.
It was just referential to planets and the screen, the Rutana circle. So just a mishmash of these things.
Amazing. So thank you so much for this conversation. I hope everybody will enjoy it as much as I did. And just to finish this, everyone can watch Mona's amazing film Moonscape on ArteArchive.org. It's part of IB'ATLI GAWAB, signed, sealed, delivered, and along with movies by Emily Jasser, Osama Muhammad, and Wiam Siham Badr Khan, and Akram Zatari. It's going to be online between November 18 and November 21. So I hope you can tune in, and thank you for joining us. And to end this, maybe we can listen to a bit of Sabah Fakhri.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
You're welcome. Thank you.